My name is Ophir Gutelson, and I'm part of a group called Unacceptable. And I'm honored to host this discussion today with where Professor Amnon Reichman from Haifa University is going to have a discussion with retired Chief Justice Dorit Beinisch. We just listened to to President Herzog addressing the nation, and I think we have a lot to discuss. So, Professor Amnon Reichman, please take the role.
Okay, so we were just in the middle of asking Chief Justice Beinisch to tell us a little bit about the proposed quote-unquote reform, a reform that the President of the State of Israel just said that as written is unacceptable. He did offer some principles, whether we will accept them or not is a different debate. But first of all, let's understand why is it unacceptable, even according to the President, and what's all the fuss about, and how does this affect the role of the Supreme Court?
Well, I'll try to make it not so long as it deserves, the topic deserves. I'll try. It's no doubt we are in a constitutional crisis in Israel now. The president described it as unrest and people are not satisfied. He tried to make it, I don't know how to react now. Both sides, it's not both sides. I have to, the way I see it, we are not talking about two different parties in a kind of debate or dispute. The problem is that those who suggested this reform, it's not a reform in our legal system. This is actually to reform the regime, to change the regime of the country.
So maybe I will say a few words about what we just heard from the president and give a bit of context. As you all know, tomorrow there is scheduled a vote for the first reading of a bill to amend basic law, the judiciary.
The thing is that you have to understand our system, every country, every state has its own legal system according to the regime, the tradition, the history, and the society in which it works. So we are very different from many other countries in our democracy. For that reason, maybe now we realize that is even fragile democracy. Why? We don't have a constitution. We are not like in the United States, we don't have a constitution. We don't have two houses of Congress, I mean, Senate and the House of Representatives. We have no other guarantee for human rights and for the order of the regime, but the only guarantee is our Supreme Court. Just to explain. For many historical reasons, we don't have the constitution. And there was a decision by the Knesset that the thing will be that our system will have basic laws who will, at the end, the decision was by the Knesset in 1950, and the basic laws will accumulate to chapters of our constitution. This never happened like that. We did have institutional basic laws that formed our government, that formed our Knesset, that formed the president institution, all the institutions, but those were not immune. Those could be changed every day, not like a constitution. We never had a law that, or a basic law, which we lack so much, and this is what the president started, that will determine how do we really enact a basic law, how do we change the basic law, like how do we change the constitution. So those are very, very uncertain tools to protect the law. So the only institution that could protect our human rights and the rule of law is the Supreme Court. The court is actually had, since the British mandate, since the establishment of the state, the court could order judicial review, to practice judicial review of government decisions on the administration, not on legislation, because we didn't have any constitutional tool to have a judicial review on legislation. This was the structure until 1992. Then, for the first time in Israel, we had the first law that had to do to protect, how to protect human rights, human dignity and liberty law. And this was the law that stated the conditions. When can we legislate in spite of the fact that we infringe upon human rights? The right to liberty, right to property, right to privacy, right to life. And those conditions are in law, in the basic law of human rights. And then happened something which changed the picture a bit, I think. So Amnon, you will correct me if this is not the moment, the critical moment, when the court decided in 1995 that it has the authority to have a judicial review on legislation if it contradicts the basic human rights law, actually, the law of dignity and liberty. And then to interfere with the unbelievable. You see, people are so excited. That's why I'm not concentrated. I get all the time those reactions. So actually, then started the discussion, a political discussion, that the court took jurisdiction upon legislation, and this is not what it was empowered to do by law. Actually, I don't think that this is the real reason why the politicians started to criticize the court. More than that, the court became or considered by politicians as an active court that can interfere with government decisions, with administrations, which was always the case, but also with legislation. Now, with legislation, the judicial review was very, very little, actually. During 30 years, the court had review about, I think, 21 laws and only certain paragraphs in law, very little interference in judicial review on legislation to see if it infringes upon the rights that are enshrined in the basic law of human rights. This was only an excuse, I must say, for the politicians, for right-wing politicians, for libertarians that developed a theory that slowly went into our society and our legal tradition, which we didn't know before. And here comes, they brought American arguments against an active court. The court is not elected by the people. It's not a democratic institution. And we shouldn't give the court such power. This is the idea. The court is too strong. The court doesn't let us rule, because, which is really, it's so funny when you think how careful, how restricted, how the court was so careful not to interfere, not with administrative decisions, not with constitutional legislation, not with regular legislation. The court, I think, and maybe I think Amnon will agree with me, was very careful, not interfering with decisions unless really in very, very limited area. Anyway, I believe that this started not because of decisions of the court. I mean, some of them, yes. Some parties really don't like, if we'll say the ultra-Orthodox, when the court decided that, and it took almost 30 years until this decision came, that they should serve in the army. Very slowly, first the court said, well, let them decide themselves, let the Knesset decide, let it be considered again. And after many years, they said it's a matter of equality. and they have to serve. I think this is one of the reasons, maybe the main reasons for religious parties that are now in our government, and not only now, but especially stronger now, to say the end of it. The court shouldn't review basic laws, and this is part of a basic law, and the court shouldn't interfere with the decision of mobilizing yeshiva boys of the Orthodox society. This was one thing. The other thing is that as I said, it's not only, it didn't come because of what happens or the decisions of the court. It came because the atmosphere was that we have to be stronger, very populist, very. And then the populist government says, who elected you? How can you decide about our fate? It's not your role. If it's not our role, whose role is to protect human rights against the government, against decisions of the regime? No one else. No one can veto a decision like the president or the American checks and balances. Who can, if the court will not interfere, will not review decisions and legislation, no one will do it, which means it brings the power from the court and from the legal system only to the government. How do they do that? How can they do that? Here comes what they call a reform. I say they, it's the members of now the coalition and the Knesset, who is ruled by the coalition. Now, another thing which is very important, our Knesset, under 20 members of Knesset from different parties, and we have enough parties, but they are ruled by a coalition. The government can rule only if it has a majority in Knesset, which means 61 members of the out of 120 that can decide and legislate everything they want. Who will check it? Who will review it? No one. As I said, no one has the right of veto. No one, they can completely rule the Knesset by the coalition, by the government. And that's the idea. Now, they say we can bring every legislation, we can decide, and the court cannot interfere. This is why I say it's not a legal reform, it's a regime reform. How do you do it? To change the system of selecting judges, which means I think we have, I wonder why the president thought that this is the first thing that we have to change. He did it because this is the demand of the current government. Actually, we have not a bad system of selecting judges. There is no perfect system for that in any other system that I know, in any other. There are always, it's problematic. Yet we have a committee that consists of 9 members, 4 of them politicians, 2 members of what we call government cabinet, ministers, 2 members of the Knesset, 2 members of the Bar Association, and 3 members of the Supreme Court. In order to, since 2008, in order to appoint, I don't want to say what was before, a majority rule in the committee of 9, you need 7 votes, 7 people to vote, which means you have to come to an agreement between the legal part of the committee and the political one, because you cannot have 7 out of 9 without coming to an agreement about the political members of the committee and the members of the Supreme Court. 3 of them who are really members of this committee. Now they started, first thing is the demand to change the way of selecting judges. They say we have a coalition, the government will be a majority, and this is how politically judges will be appointed to the court. This is the worst thing that we can think of. Who will review decisions of government and Knesset? Who? If the judges will be people selected, appointed by the same politicians. They will not criticize, they will not review. This is the main danger. Now, if someone, a judge in a district court, in a lower court, in the magistrate court wants a promotion, He has to find that the government, that the people in the committee will like him, will appreciate him. He will be one of us, as they say. This is the way they say it. We want our judges. He will be one of us, or she, which actually means that they can control the court. There will be no judicial review, no real judicial review, which means also that human rights are not protected. Because when do we come to this conflict? When there is a government decision or a Knesset decision that infringes upon rights of the people. And, we had so many, which is natural, for security reasons, for the need of the public safety, for many other reasons. Of course, this is the way you run a government. You cannot protect, there are not absolute rights, there are relative rights, and they could be, of course, infringed upon. So if the court will not see to it, who will check? No one. If we're talking about losing our democracy, we're talking about that. No protection for the rights of the people, because if not the court, the two other branches of government, Knesset and government, are elected. They need very popular vote, populism. They want to talk to their constituents. And the only thing that really the court is not elected by the people, but this is not the weakness of the court. This is the strength that is needed for a court, because they're not dependent on public opinion. They can really enforce the law. They can apply the law according to legal principles, to values, of course. So this is what they want to change, the first thing that they want to change. But they want to be sure about it. So we have more safeguards for the government now. One thing is that they'll have a notwithstanding clause, an override clause, which the Americans don't know really. It exists, as much as I know, in Canada, and only in very different manner, which means that if the court will decide that a law is not constitutional because it's not according to the basic law, and will decide to strike down a piece of legislation, even one paragraph, the Knesset would say, in spite of it, to override it and to bring this same legislation again to life, which means that court decisions are actually abolished. They do not exist. They're in the hands of the Knesset with the override. So this is, again, so dangerous. What is the role of the court then, if they cannot even keep decisions? Or it's unbelievable, I must say, for us to think that court can decide and then they can say, well, 61 members of the Knesset, the coalition, is enough to say, we don't accept it, we abolish it. This is the second, what they call reform. Another thing is, we always had a very important institution of attorney generals and a legal advisors to ministers in the government. Very important role of the legal advisors, because they have to tell them, you can do this, but you can't do it this way because it's not legal. You have to direct the minister, the administration, how to behave, how to decide in according with the law. They exist because of the law. So here comes the idea, first of all, that legal advisor shouldn't be a public office. Again, not always understood by Americans because they are used to political nominations. It was always an independent role, not politically as much as possible influenced by politicians, but by legal people, legal minds, and to keep the law. Another thing is our tradition and our judgments of the court say that when the Attorney General and legal advisors advise their minister or the government, until the court decides differently, it binds them. Now they say, no, this is only a recommendation. We don't have to keep this, the opinion of the legal advisor. If we like it, we take it. If not, we'll take our advisor and he will agree with us. Again, it's really, again, it's one of the tools to rule without keeping the law. We'll do what we want. And I think those are another thing is the reasonableness. The court decides that certain things, and there are rules, it's not just the mood of the judge, rules when it's reasonable or not to take a decision. Let's say, and this happened just now, when the court says a minister in the government that had convictions in his past, who is really only a short time before was sentenced by the court, cannot be a minister in charge of people who work for him with discipline, and maybe it can be, according to the formal demands, a member of Knesset, but not to be a head of a minister and a secretary of one issue or the other, of one minister or the other. This is, of course, not reasonable. Let's say that tomorrow, I'm afraid it's not just imagination, Prime Minister decides he wants to appoint his son, his family, someone to be a minister. We would say it's not reasonable. No, what the reform says is you cannot review a decision to appoint someone to office because of unreasonableness. This will not be anymore, which means we can do whatever we want, reasonable or not by the court. I think, Amnon, those are the changes, I think, that we are talking about. Now, everyone knows that democracy means independence of the courts. The first thing is an independent court. This is the most important characteristic for a court in a democracy. When it's not a democracy, you don't need an independent court. You just give the judges the orders and it works. Like in Poland, like in Russia, like in Hungary. But in a democratic state, it's impossible to have a court which is not independent. So this is the first thing that we are afraid of. Losing the main character of democracy and not independent court, dependent court. And this is the idea of how they want to appoint the judges. This is what we are so worried. As to the override, maybe it's possible, although it's not part of our system at all, to say, but not 61 members, not the coalition will interfere with the court decision. Maybe you have 70, maybe you would say on certain conditions, if it's not, it has to do with human rights, you can find different characteristics to say when to override and when it's impossible to override a decision of the court. Now, what is the problem about, let's say, the compromise that today the president just now suggested? I think, and maybe it's interesting, Amnon, what do you think about it? Because it's a first impression, I heard it for the first time, we all heard it for the first time, to look at the issue as if it's two parties having to get a compromise is the wrong way to see it. We said all the time, you have to put aside all the suggestions for reform, all this new legislation, and let's think what could really improve the system and what would damage the system, what would help the system. This has nothing to do. Now there is a kind of, we are in the times of, this is all fake news. So they keep saying and giving information, wrong information to the public. Let's say everyone knows how to say that the system of appointing judges is terrible because judges select their own friends and they appoint the judges. This is a lie, just a lie. And it was said a week ago also by Prime Minister at CNN. We have to put an end to the system that judges appoint judges. They don't, as I explained before. It's a decision of a body, a collective body, not an easy one, and comes to decision with agreements between politicians and judges. Judges do not appoint their own friends to the court. But they keep saying it. Then they say the public lost the faith, confidence in the court, and we have to correct it. All the polls show that the court gains much more confidence and faith of the public than the politicians, than the Knesset members, and then the government, much more. But when you say it once and again, it becomes, this is the truth. And this is the way how they introduce the reform. The only thing that we said is, all people that support our system, we have to find a way. The court is overloaded, as the president said. We have to find a way to, and I tried when I was president, everyone tried, to make the process easier, shorter, to have more judges, to have more manpower. This is, the court could function better. It's a very, very loaded court, but it has nothing to do with all those proposals to change. All the proposals have nothing to do with the problems of the court. It's not to review the problems of the court. It's to review the problems of the government, who wants to have a full control on everything that happens in law enforcement, in law, and in the public life. And this is a bit too much. I think that gives a bit the picture as much as I can. Excuse me,
Okay, so we've just heard from President Beinisch, who's going to return in a second. I want to reflect together, Dorit, maybe on three things together with you. One is the issue of timing. You've mentioned it briefly, but these reforms are being pushed through in a relatively, on steroids, on really fast,
yes,
on a fast track.
I agree. Yes, everyone agrees.
Really
yes.
Fast. And even the president now said in his appeal for a compromise, whether it's a compromise or not, I'm not sure at all that what we've heard is actually a balanced compromise, but maybe we should think about it more carefully. He said that the changes to the Judicial Selection Committee will be immediate. Now,
why? I don't know why.
Exactly. That's what I worry about, because everything is being rushed so far. And if one thing we know about constitutional law, if there's one thing we should take away from the theory of constitutional law, is that the Constitution is there to prevent a fleeting majority, a random majority that happens today but won't be there tomorrow, from capturing the system, from taking in the money and running. The idea of a constitution is to be a buffer between this majority and the ability to change the very structure, the very basic structure of the system. So,
exactly.
So usually what we do is we say, whenever we do that, the application of the change will start as of the subsequent Knesset, as of the following Knesset, so that you don't have this conflict of interest that you legislate for yourself. You remove whatever obstacles they're there, and then you say, oh, we've just removed the obstacles. I can actually now appoint all the judges myself. So why do you think...
You're completely right, Amnon. The thing is, and I can tell you, my colleagues from Canada, from the States, keep saying, how did they prepare it? In 1 month, they could change everything. No, the thing is that there was a movement working on it, I went almost secretly. For 10 years, this is what the Minister of Justice said, and preparing everything, not asking the public, not having debates in the public, just to prepare it. It was kind of secretly. I mean, they told their ideas, but they didn't spread the program. They didn't say what there was nothing was discussed. As you say, when you need a constitutional reform, when Canada had the charter, it took them, there were scandals, there were demonstrations, it wasn't easy, but the public took part and they had to come to a compromise in the public. This is the process. It's a process. Now they came, everything in the files prepared and shoot it without any readiness to hear anything against it. They took, it's more than that, they took over the Knesset. The committee that is responsible for that in the Knesset belongs to an extreme party in the government. This is the head of the committee, the Minister of Justice, who was part of it, and immediately they wanted to go to the Knesset in 1 month with all this very heavy and important legislation without discussing it, without no hearings, nothing, just to go ahead quickly to take over everything. This is kind of a coup. It's really a revolution.
It's a form of a putsch, but there's another element of this where they wanted to start upon legislation. They don't even say whatever we do will come into force in the future.
Next year, not only. They said that they won't accept the idea of the legal advisor of the Knesset, of the committee, that he said, okay, prepare it for next Knesset. No, today. And this is very strange. It's so essential for them, as you understand, that the president said that the first thing immediately is to change the committee that appoint judges. Why? Why? Yes. It's not held by judges, as they say. It's very balanced. It's compromise between all parts of the committee, all the members. So something is suspicious. Why is it so urgent? And this is the critical thing. If they can take over the appointment of judges, selecting of judges, they have almost everything already in their hands because they control the court. They control the court.
I think this is the most troubling aspect.
Yes.
The more I think about
this shouldn't be so immediate. What happened? Almost 75 years, the courts are functioning, and I dare say the court is appreciated and has really a lot of appreciation all over the professional field, all over, really. I meet people from many countries, and the court was very, very accepted and very good. And now, that's why everyone is disappointed, everyone is bothered, they don't understand what happened. And we don't really understand why it happened that way. Now they have a saying, but the people want the trust of the court. The people didn't know what they're going to do. And as I said, the trust is not so bad. There's a lot of confidence in the court by the people. But if you keep saying day and night that the court is doing terrible things, the court is dangerous, we have to restrain the court, what do they know? So maybe they're right. This is how it works. This is propaganda. And this is what worries us so much. Now I understand that you have questions.
Yes, there could
I
be
didn't follow the questions because I talked too much.
That's fine. No, you shouldn't follow on the chat. Ophir will moderate the questions.
Yeah, I will moderate later to keep going. Yeah.
So I think we came to the point that we can discuss the questions.
So what is, I just want to recap. So we have a very problematic proposal that Dorit, that you've analyzed all its components, and we see that each of those components is unbalanced because it gives the coalition majority control, and taken together, it's super unbalanced because wherever you go, there's the coalition majority has a choke on the system. Yes. And we talked about the very problematic aspect that of the immediate getting into force, that it will get into force immediately, which is also a problem, which I think is the main problem of the president's so quote unquote compromise, because, you know, if you would say, okay, let's think about it, and then for the next Knesset, I think the whole spin of it would have said, maybe there's something there, but as soon as
in a public discussion, and the public will consider it and we'll see what is needed and what not.
But this is not what he said, and I think that's a cause for concern. Now the question now becomes, okay, now that we see it, and that's going to be my last question, then we'll open it for questions for the audience. What lies ahead? So the Knesset is supposed to take a vote tomorrow. We don't know if they will do it or not now, pursuant to the president's call. You know, we will know by tomorrow, but, you know, they could say, okay, we accept the president, but we will accept the president after the first reading, and then we will oppose it. Then the question is, at a certain point, this might end up being litigated by the court because there are some serious constitutional problems as the proposals are written. How do you, like, what do you see, how do you perceive of things that can be done down the line?
I must say that one of the things that I'm worried, it's the first time for many, many years that I was in service so much that I don't know what will be the day after tomorrow. I don't know, because we may come to a serious crisis. Let's say, and I couldn't talk about what are the basic laws. First, they want to legislate that a basic law could not be reviewed by the court. The other thing is that every law that they want to keep will be a basic law, because we have no rules how to legislate the basic laws. We don't have any rules about it. The first basic law that they are talking about is to appoint again a minister, Dorit, that was, of course, by the court decided that he cannot be a minister anymore. They'll have a basic law, and the legislation says that the court cannot review a basic law. Now, just imagine that there will be a petition to the Supreme Court, and the court will decide again that he can't be, and this is not a matter, and it's true, this is not a matter for a basic law. To appoint a minister is not a basic law. To change the basic law of government every 2 months or every week because they want something, this is not how you react towards a respect of a basic law. Now, if the court reviews and the government does not obey, where are we with this crisis? Someone asked me today and I have no answer, I must say. I'm worried. That's the only thing I can say. I'm really worried. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we have a sense of urgency here. I think now if we needed another affirmation that this is really serious business and we are in a juncture or crossroads, one path leading away from democracy towards something illiberal, maybe a hollow democracy, maybe some autocratic regime where the majority has no checks on it. Another path, not easy to follow, but requires some resistance, might actually get us away from these particular reforms, who knows where, but at least away from these particular reforms. And with that in mind, I want to stress how important it is that you are all, the audience, are all with us. I'm sure you have some questions. So Ophir, I pass the floor to you. I turn running this to you, so you can moderate some of the questions.
I can.
I just can tell you, you can't realize how much tension is in the air these days. I felt after this president's address that I can't concentrate, as you could feel from the beginning, because I don't know.
You can hear the stress. I mean, like, we definitely.
It's a stress. It's a real stress that we are, literally a stress that every one of us feels himself with that.
I would like to extend the question before I open to the floor. I mean, we always talk about the relationship to a war jury and Jewish Americans, and there is a lot of tension that, again, I mean, like, we're talking about minorities and rights, but we also know that the court is also protecting other elements of relationship between the diaspora and in Israel. I mean, can you maybe refer to that point and what risk it would make over the cohesion of the people if the court is changed, if it's becoming a political court?
Well, the problem is now, what will be the government's policy, it will not be reviewed by the court. So now they are considering, again, if you're talking about Jews in the diaspora, they are talking about changing the law of return, which has a lot of influence on Jews all over the world, or is strengthening the Orthodox community in Israel vis-a-vis other Reform Jews or conservative Jews. Every decision, we always decided where we come into the picture as a court to distribute finance as much as possible equally, not to give preference to one group of Jews on the other. Who will review it? The government that is controlled by extreme, very extreme partners to the coalition, Orthodox and not only Orthodox. So this may have influence, I'm afraid, also on and even the attitude of Jews to Israel. I'm worried about it, that if we'll have a gap between Jews especially in the United States, where it's the largest Jewish community, but all over, because of changes done by the strong Orthodox views in the government, and no one will regard the equality. You know, I didn't mention it before because we have to be more concise, but we don't have now equality in our legislation of human dignity and liberty, our Bill of Rights, actually. Equality is not mentioned there because Orthodox parties, religious parties were afraid of bringing equality, which may sometimes not be in the view of their religious views. This is elementary, that we need equality. The court introduced, since the beginning of the court, really since the beginning, the foundation of the state, equality is a value that is protected by the court, but not enshrined in legislation. So one of the things, if you ask what they can change, if they will not bring in the equality that we always want to bring, it's a danger. Not only to Jews all over the world, to other population in Israel too. This is again democracy. So this is only one example.
Okay, I'm going to ask. I mean, I see Itai is asking a question about the legal counsel system, and he's mentioning that former government legal counsel Avichai Mendelblit said that the most critical change is actually the removal of the power of the legal counsels to the various government ministers. In his mind, it's more critical than any of the other proposed changes. What is your thought about that?
I think it's a very dangerous proposal. Just imagine how it may, I'm afraid to say, but this is it. It gives more weight to corruption, actually. If this is part of it, not only legality, not only keeping the law by member of government, but just think that he says, well, he said that I should have a bit about it and then see what is the offer to the government to build the road or to build the buildings of the, but I have a friend, he can do that better. So when he can do that better, it happened in Turkey. Who knows? This is a very, I think, from that point of view of corruption. Another thing is security, the international society. This is another aspect that we didn't discuss, but this gave us part of power to say everywhere, and it worked. It worked that we could say our court is independent, and if things were done in the territories or in the military that shouldn't be done, the court will review. We don't need an international court. This was our protection for our people, was the court. And we may lose that too. This is one of the things. Yes.
I want to add to what Chief Justice Beinisch just said. So corruption is key in the idea, again, because this is what politicians could do. They could dole out all kinds of perks and then get elected. And we know corruption also exists in the United States. There's nothing new about that. But also, you see, it's going to really burden the court. Because the way it works now is, again, we have one Supreme Court that gets a lot of petitions. Some of it now is also at the district court level, but there are a lot of petitions. If the Attorney General or the legal counsel of the government, their opinion will not be binding, first of all, it will be bad for business. Why? Because business will be in an uncertain position. I just got something from the government, but I can't really know if the government itself will abide by it. Maybe the government itself down the line would say, it was just a recommendation. So it will be bad for business, but it would also really burden the court. Why? Because you'll have to go with each of these things. You'll have to litigate it at the end of the day. Is it binding? Is it not binding? Which part of it is binding? Which part? And this is not how the system is designed. In the United States, you have many courts, state court, federal courts. In Israel, basically, you have 6 district courts that are empowered to do administrative law and 1 Supreme Court. With some things, you go straight to the Supreme Court sitting as a High Court of Justice, and that's it. So it's not designed, it will not fit the system. And there will be more litigation, more uncertainty because you wouldn't know where you stand. It will decrease governability. They care about governability. It will decrease governability. So it doesn't make sense. It's like what Justice Beinisch said. There is a problem, but solution to the problem doesn't fit. So it doesn't make sense. So it makes you suspicious. Maybe it's just a power grab. Maybe it's just a power grab.
And we didn't touch, just because we cannot touch all the points, the problem of economy. And now really you see that it's for the first time, the startups, the banks, the economical power of Israel, which is really strong and impressive, is worried now. And we didn't talk about it because it needs stability, it needs certainty, and this is in danger if you don't know what the court will be and how it will function. So this is another aspect of the danger that we didn't discuss.
Dorit,
Yes.
I have a question from Neri, and since she's one of
Yes.
the hosts, she can ask it on her own. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I know you spent all your professional life to protect the Israeli citizens. And my question is right now, with everything that happens, when the Israeli citizens are looking at the judges as leaders right now, because we are not protected anymore. You are telling us you can't protect us right
I'm
now.
afraid it may happen, of course, with this, what's called the reform, yes.
So what can the citizens do if they're not protected by the court?
I don't know. First of all, we believe that we can change this decision. This is what we are talking about. For the first time in Israel, all of us see such a reaction, demonstrations, and really reactions from the people, really from the people, thousands and thousands of people, and military people, economy involved. Everyone is now, I'm not talking about our, of course, judges, and everyone feels that we may and we have to change this decision. And it's dangerous because we have now terrible gaps between those 2 parties, and this is dangerous in itself. I believe that the court should remain strong and independent, and we'll try our best with our influence, your influence, everyone. And we got really, it's moving to see. What I got yesterday from our Canadians colleagues, I don't know, Amnon, if you had the time to see it.
Yes, of course.
All the Supreme Courts retired from Canada, not only Jewish, all the Supreme Courts, academic, university presidents, more than 100 people who wrote, and they know us because we have very similar characteristics in our systems, and we correspond with them usually professionally. You see the reaction. People are really shocked. So if you say, what can we do? I was talking in a school, 18 years old, next year going to the army, next year going to vote. And they say, what can we do? You have to be aware that you can. We have to feel that we have to fight to change it. And the public opinion, I believe that public opinion can influence. We are not sure now, but I hope we have no other solution. That's the way I feel about it. Yes, Ophir.
Dorit, next question is, Gershon is asking, one smart person said, if something works, don't change. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Question, why change reform is required? Please specific the top problematic element that they impact the society and there is consensus about the need of change. So basically, if there is a reform needed, any reform, not rushed one, not
yes.
I mean, what do you think should be done, or in a broad agreement?
A lot has been already thought about it, done programs. It's too serious. I cannot give something out of my sleeve. I think maybe we can change the construction, not 3 layers of courts, but 4 layers of court of appeal, which will take more of the work and the load of the Supreme Court, like you have in everything. I think we could add more judges. I believe that we need a basic law of legislation that will be decided there. What can be done with a basic law, what is not a basic law, and how can we change it? Like in every constitution, you know how you can change the constitution. If you can change the constitution, there's a lot of work to do, possibly. This is what the president says, but this is not something urgent that we can bring this. Yes, it takes time. It's really, it has to be deep review of things. In 75 years, all the institutions could be inspected. I believe that our legal system is much better than other institutions that we have and need always a reform in every field, medical, education, that's it.
Yes. I have a question from Kathy Goldberg from Chicago, and she's kind of like asking about, I mean, part of it is probably relevant to, I mean, why asking, I mean, usually Jewish Americans are actually not, want to get involved in Israeli politics, right? And the question is like, can both of you explain a bit more about why it's not an issue of left and right in Israeli politics arena? How is this much bigger than that? Those for us trying to help explain Americans and others abroad are getting pushback from those saying they don't want to interfere in an internal politic debate.
First, I must say that I also don't think that any other country, even Jews in other countries, should interfere with our internal problems. If it wouldn't be a basic serious problem of the construction of the institutional build of how Israel functions, not details. It's really not right and left. We are not talking about the problems, not many problems we have with keeping the territories, with things that are really not accepted. The real problem is that we are talking about a Jewish democratic state, and we don't really have a consensus. What is a Jewish state and what is a democratic state? One group says the majority is a democracy, and the majority wants us, and this is the way democracy functions. And this is, of course, not true. We're going to the beginning of our discussion. Democracy is more than a majority. It needs a majority, but not only a majority. An independent court system and separation of powers and checks and balances is the basis of democracy. So this is not internal problems. This is the basic problem. And after all, Jews all over the world are involved. Many aspects in our faith, it's part of the Jewish state, in my view, and not only in my view, our DNA is that we are part of the Jewish people. We see to it that this is the home for Jews when needed and when they want. And that's why they should feel really mixed, and not to suggest, of course, not to run our country and not to interfere with our internal problems. But this is more than that.
Thank you. Peter is basically quoting here the 46th word that was quoted today by President Biden. The genius of American democracy and Israeli democracy is that they are both built on strong institutions, on check and balances, on independent judiciary. Building consensus of fundamental changes is really important to ensure that the people buy into them so they can be sustained. So that was the article that came up in the New York Times.
Yes.
That summarized a lot. Anything you want to say about it?
Shorter than I have wasted your time. Good. Okay. But this is it. We share the same values. That's what I say. We have different problems, but we share the same values. And some of the problems are even similar in every liberal democracy. And
I think that's really crucial, because I mean, like, many people are asking in a way, but hey, the US is also working with Poland and Hungary and Turkey. I mean, they're part of NATO, right? And I mean, and the question is always asked. I mean, like, it seems like, I mean, I don't know if I read it on this article or another one, we are shared in values with the US, not necessarily only interests. And I think that I think is a fundamental difference between the relationship between the two countries.
this is our history. This is our history all the years, that we share also the same way of thinking, the same values. It's not only an interest. With interest, you can sometimes cooperate with the devil, but this is not what we want to be.
Yeah.
I think we are coming to the last
to the last question. Yes. Maya Eyal is saying, how do you respond to those who say that the court, Bagatz, is a leftist and out of control, and that the judges basically make decisions? What is bipartisan, non-political reason to oppose this reform?
Actually, I hear it all the time, talking about leftist court, and I wonder where it came from. This is also, again, the fake news. I don't remember left-wing members of the court. It's funny. It was an apolitical court always. I didn't know exactly who voted for whom, because it wasn't political nominations. So I don't know. I can show you that some of them, I always suspected they belonged to the right wing, but we never talked about it because we didn't discuss politics. So I don't know how they made it that you hear all the time a leftist court. This is stupid, I must say. Yeah, but people believe that this is true because they hear it day and morning and evening and on television and everywhere. It's not true. It's not only now. Now they say we succeeded to bring few conservative justices. I don't want to go into the history of the court. They were not leftist. They were very, very, I don't know how you say mamnachtiim, but they were very not really right or left, pro-Israel, very much. This is true. And this was the main thing for judges, that they are an institution of the state. This is true, but not left and right. This is another legend.
Yeah, I feel like we already know that. I mean, anyone who is not aligned with anything that is going on right now is being defined that way. So,
of course, especially human rights, which was historically part of the right in Israel. They supported human rights. Now it became the left. It's not right and not left. Human rights.
It's also part of very, very deep Jewish values.
No.
Right. Amnon, Dorit, thank you so much for taking the time. Amnon, I'll let you finalize the words, and yeah.
I want to take this opportunity and say very briefly three things. First of all, thank you very much to Chief Justice Dorit Beinisch for taking the time. I know it wasn't easy for me because I was still under the impression of President Herzog's words, which were in...
No, Aniba, excuse me, they're waiting for me. I thank you so much, but my family is already nervous about me being busy all the time.
Dorit, thank you.
Okay.
So I thank you so much for listening and for cooperation.
Thank you, Dorit. And we can thank you for a couple of final words. Thank you, Dorit.
Yes, thank you, Dorit. Thank you very much. So the first is, as Dorit was saying, the words of Herzog, President Herzog, I think you could see how stressed he is. But also, it was really troubling to see that he was trying to make this equation. They were hurt by the Natkud, by the withdrawal from Gaza, and the others were hurt by the Supreme Court initiative, and everybody's hurt. So we should, I think this is really, I think it makes you wonder, whether that's a way to build the Constitution, because this is a constitutional moment. That's the second point I want to say. We are now in a constitutional moment. I think it's critical to hear the voices of Israelis and Jews who live in outside of Israel now. Zionism is not just a province of Israelis. Zionism is a province of people with Israeli citizenship or Jews who live outside, because the reforms that will be made now will affect us may affect us for years to come, especially if there is a capture. Especially if there's a capture, if we don't stop, if we don't start to deliberate calmly, there's no rush, there's no pressure, there isn't any doom cry. The Iranians are not attacking us and we have to respond immediately. This is not the case. We have to stay calm, stay collected, review whatever criticism there is. There is valid criticism. The court is not representative enough in the sense that, that there are fewer Mizrahis on the court. It's a problem. Fixing it the way they want it fixed is wrong. And the last thing I want to say, stay tuned. This is going to be a long run, a long haul. This is not some sprint and that's it. We're going to 6 days. We want it and that's it. No, more likely than not, we will need your input. When you are asking, Biden did not just come out of blue air and say those 46 words. He realized from below, also from Congress, from the House of Representatives and the Senate and state level is also important. Use your voice. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. We need it.
Thank you very much, Amnon. That was crucial. And so I'm just going to say to those who are here, we have 140 people. I mean, like keep in touch with us either through our Facebook page, Unacceptable or unacceptable.org. We are also working in Europe. There is other sister Defending Israeli Democracy team. And we are going to be in touch and we are going to keep working hard. And if you have any idea, any thoughts, please reach out. So keep in touch and please raise your voice because now it's the time for talk and not for silence. Thank you, Amnon. Have a good day, night, noon, wherever you are. Bye-bye.